She sat on the windowsill, looking down at the bustling courtyard outside. The November morning was gloomy, heavy and gray like an iron well cover. On the branches of a lonely linden tree, the last leaves trembled, ready to fall with the first gusts of wind. She had grown up in this apartment. Her grandmother had lived here, a warm, kind woman who smelled of mint tea and fresh pastries. It was her grandmother who left her this two-room apartment, small but cozy. Now half of that apartment belonged to her ex-husband. "You have no right," she had shouted in court as the judge read the decision. "This is my apartment. Mine." "Legally, it's correct," he had replied coldly, adjusting his watch. He had always been that way, rational, logical, merciless in his certainty. She remembered the day he packed up and left. No scandals, no broken dishes. He just said, "There's no point anymore." And now this person, who was nothing to her anymore, suddenly owned half of her home. She jumped off the windowsill and walked around the room. Everything was familiar and dear. The dark furniture, the faded curtains, the books on the shelves, remnants of a past life that had no room for strangers. But he wasn't interested in sentimentality. "I'm selling my share," he told her a few days ago when they met at the notary's office. "Either you buy it or I'll find a buyer." She hadn't responded then. She knew she didn't have the money. Where could she get $3 million? Now she wandered around the apartment, trying to find a way out. Options spun in her head. Take a loan, borrow somehow, try to persuade him. The doorbell rang. She opened the door and froze. He was standing there holding some envelope. "What do you want?" she asked, restraining herself. "We need to talk." "About what? You've already made your decision." He walked inside, looking around as if checking what had changed since he had lived there. "Let's be honest," he began. "You can't buy out my share." She stayed silent. "I don't want to sell it to strangers, but I need the money." "Then what are you suggesting?" He sighed. "Let's try to come to some sort of agreement." She crossed her arms. "After everything, you think I've lost my mind?" "No," he winced. "I just thought maybe you'd want to sell the whole apartment. We'll split the money and you can buy something else." "My grandmother lived here," she snapped. "And now you want me to sell it?" "Calm down, I'm just offering an option," he said, shaking his head. "This is my home," she said. He was silent for a while, then finally said, "You'll have to." "Get out!" she exploded. He clenched his fists. "We'll see who walks away in the end." "We'll see, all right. Now leave." The room fell silent. Outside, the annoying rain tapped against the glass. She stayed late at work. It was already dark outside, the office was empty, but she kept typing, correcting endless spreadsheets. Her eyes burned with fatigue, her fingers cramped, but she couldn't stop. Her life now ran on a strict schedule. She left home at 7, was in the office by 9, then ran to a call center in the evening where she called clients until midnight. On weekends, she scrubbed floors at a restaurant owned by a distant relative. All her money went to paying the loans she had taken to buy out his share. The apartment was hers again, but she had paid dearly for that victory. When she finally closed her laptop and stepped outside, the air felt icy. The November night was damp, and the wind ripped the few remaining leaves from the trees, chasing them across the pavement. She wrapped herself in a thin coat, and headed to the metro. Her phone buzzed faintly in her bag. She wearily pulled it out and checked the screen. She had set the reminder herself. And now, the phone insistently reminded her of reality. Bank payment due tomorrow. Don't forget. As if she could. The 3rd of the month always felt like a death sentence. She couldn't afford to miss a payment. The subway car was crowded and stuffy. She stood by the door, staring at her reflection in the window, dark circles under her eyes, a tired gaze, disheveled hair. When was the last time she slept properly? She remembered how different life had been a year ago. She used to enjoy evening coffee at her favorite cafe, could go shopping without panicked calculations in her head. Now, her life was just endless work, debt, bills. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was an unknown number. "Hello? Hey," came a familiar voice. She froze. "What do you want?" her voice cracked. "Just wanted to know how you were doing." "How do you think?" "I've taken on loans, working like crazy. How do you think I feel?" Silence. "So I guess it's too late to ask to borrow some money?" She smirked. "Too late. I already gave it all to you. Now I'm dealing with the mess." "You didn't have to. I had to," she snapped. "This was my grandmother's apartment. I couldn't let you take it." She hung up and gripped the phone tightly. Her heart pounded and a lump rose in her throat. By the time she got home, she was completely exhausted. She dropped her coat, went to the kitchen, made some tea, and she wrung out the rag and dropped it into the bucket of dirty water. The floor in the restaurant's hall sparkled with cleanliness. Her work. For 6 months now, she had been scrubbing these marble tiles on weekends, listening to the laughter of patrons, the clinking of glasses, the ordering of expensive wines. They never noticed her, and she preferred it that way. It was easier to be invisible than to catch pitying glances. She straightened up and took a deep breath. Her body ached from exhaustion. It was her 3rd shift of the day. Office in the morning, call center in the evening, and now this. Life had turned into a never-ending race where the only goal was not to collapse. "Waiter! More champagne!" called out a loud voice. She turned instinctively and immediately felt a tight knot in her chest. At a table by the panoramic window sat her ex, relaxed, smug, dressed in an expensive suit. Beside him was a glamorous blonde in a red dress, clearly much younger. They laughed, chatted, clinked glasses. She took a step back, hoping he wouldn't notice her. But it was too late. He looked up, frowned, then smirked. "Well, well," he said, putting down his glass. She turned away, picked up her bucket, and was about to leave when his voice stopped her. "Is that really you?" She froze but didn't respond. Wait, he said, getting up and approaching slowly, savoring the moment. "A cleaning lady now. Here?" She gripped the handle of the bucket so tightly her knuckles turned white. "I knew you'd end up poor," he chuckled. The blonde behind him giggled. "Is that your ex?" she asked, playfully. "Yep," he nodded. "Divorced. Look what she's become." She looked up at him calmly. "No, you're the one who's fallen," she replied. His smirk faltered. "I paid for my place. Every cent I earned myself. I didn't ask for handouts. I didn't run to court crying. I worked. And you spend other people's money on cheap women." The blonde flared. "Who are you calling cheap, you freak?" But she no longer looked at them. She picked up the bucket and walked toward the back room. Her ex stood in the middle of the hall, clenched fists, betraying his anger. Outside, snow began to fall. She returned to the supply room, tossed the rag into the bucket, and sat on a worn-out stool. Her heart thudded in her chest. She closed her eyes, trying to calm the tremor rising inside. How long had it been since she last saw him? A year and a half? 2? Ever since he had taken her to court over the apartment and forced her to take a loan. He had disappeared from her life and now stood there again, smirking, throwing poison words, thinking she was broken. She smiled. He couldn't be more wrong. Her phone vibrated again. She pulled it out and checked the screen. A message from her distant uncle, the owner of the restaurant. "Come to my office tomorrow. We need to discuss a new position." She smiled. Finally, it seemed, her time had come. The next day, she walked into the spacious office on the top floor of the restaurant. Huge windows, a massive hardwood desk, shelves lined with books. Behind the desk sat the restaurant's owner. "Take a seat," he said warmly, nodding at the chair. She sat, crossing her legs. "I've been watching you for a while," he began. "You worked tirelessly, never complained, never asked for special treatment." She stayed silent. "I think it's time. Time for you to take the position of restaurant manager, and maybe later, the whole chain." She froze. "Manager? Me?" "Why not? Your family. You understand people, and most importantly, you know how to work. You've proven it." She lowered her eyes, barely holding back her emotions. "Thank you. I won't let you down." "I'm sure you won't," he smiled. "Now, let's have a little fun. I heard your ex was here last night." She nodded. A mischievous spark lit up in his eyes. "Excellent. I have an idea." Her ex was, once again, sitting in the restaurant, sipping whiskey, in a good mood. The meeting with her last weekend had amused him. It was nice to see how life had put everything in its place. Then, the atmosphere changed. The floor manager whispered something to a waiter, and the energy in the room shifted. "What's going on?" asked the blonde. He shrugged. Just then, the doors opened, and she walked in. No longer in a cleaning uniform. She wore a sleek, elegant suit, a light silk scarf around her neck. She walked with confidence, followed by the manager. "Good evening," she said, stopping at their table. He blinked, confused. "What's this all about?" She smiled and turned to the waiter. "This gentleman and his guests are now on the blacklist. They will no longer be served in any of our restaurants." He paled. "What?" "Oh no, what a problem," the blonde said with fake surprise. "Come on, let's just go find another place." She stood, but he didn't move. He kept staring at her, struggling to process what was happening. "Is this a joke?" he asked. "No," she said calmly. "This is life. Just like your petty attempt to humiliate me last time." The waiter placed the bill on the table. "Please settle and leave the premises." He clenched his fists. "You haven't achieved anything. You just got lucky your rich relative—" "I've achieved the right to look you in the eye without shame," she interrupted. "Can you say the same?" He jumped up, nearly knocking over his glass, threw cash on the table, and walked out. She watched him go and felt a strange sense of relief. The past was finally behind her. The apartment she had fought so hard to reclaim from her ex was now fully hers again. No more endless payments, no more calls from the bank, no more threats from debt collectors. Her uncle had wanted to pay off her debts immediately as a gift, but she had refused. She couldn't accept that kind of help. It was important to prove to both herself and to him that she could pull herself out of that nightmare on her own. "If you want to work, fine," he had said with a shrug. "But only as manager." She had nodded. "And don't set my salary above what a real manager earns. I want it fair." He had looked at her for a long moment, then smiled. "Well then, your rules." And so she stayed at the restaurant, not as a powerless cleaner anymore, but as the one in charge. The owner was a man who understood the value of family. When she, even a distant relative, turned down, she refused to pay off her loan from support. But he understood that there was no place for fear in her heart, so she could be helped differently. When he found out exactly who had dragged her through the mud, his eyes darkened. "That one," he said to his secretary, clasping his fingers together. "He lives for pleasure while she earns money to pay his debts." The secretary nodded. "That's right. The ex-husband took half of her apartment in court, took the money, and spent it on himself. Now he's playing a successful businessman, but in reality, he's just a gigolo living off his new girlfriend." He paused, drumming his fingers on the desk. "Find me reliable people. Let them explain to this gentleman that he acted wrongly." Later, the ex-husband left the club late at night. The blonde had long gone, leaving him at the bar. He began to boast about how great a businessman he was. He inhaled the night air when he suddenly heard footsteps behind him. He turned around and saw two tall men in black, their faces hidden by hoods. "What's this?" he asked, his voice trembling. "You're him, right? The ex-husband?" He tensed but said nothing. The first blow hit his stomach. He doubled over, clutching his side. Another struck his jaw. The world spun. He collapsed onto the pavement, feeling something warm trickle down his lips. "This is for your ex-wife and her grandmother," he heard before everything went dark. An ugly scar remained forever, a reminder that sometimes it's better to think with your own head.